I did this project on my grandfather from my dad's side, Moshe Hadromi, and his experience in the Holocaust. I will refer to him as Moshe Mandelman for most of the documentary, as this is his birth name, and the name Hadromi, which I will talk about later, was changed later in his life. World War II began in Europe on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Great Britain and France responded by declaring war on Germany on September 3rd. The war between the USSR and Germany began on June 22, 1941, with Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. The principal belligerents were the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Allies, France, Great Britain, the United States, the Soviet Union, and to a lesser extent, China. Millions of European Jews were murdered, as well as millions of others, including Romani people, the intellectually disabled, dissidents, and homosexuals, by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. Unlike other massacres, the Holocaust was very specific. In fact, the Nazis had prepared a list of how many Jews they would kill in each country, which is what is so scary about it. Moshe Mandelman was born to his dad Yaakov Mandelman and his mom Yochebed Mandelman, and had an older sister Miriam. His dad was Polish and lived in a healing home for tuberculosis before the Nazis arrived. He quote-unquote disappeared, probably captured and killed, very early on, so not much is known about him. He lived with his mom, who was German, and his grandfather, from which side is unknown, as a middle-class family. His sister was married and lived in a different home. She maybe had a kid or kids, but also quote-unquote disappeared early on with her family. They lived in Lodz, Poland, also known as Lodz. His family were religious, but he himself wasn't that religious. Lodz at the time was a tactile city, and many had small tactile factories. Moshe studied in a Jewish school like Stratford. Of 223,000 Jews in Lodz, only 10,000 survived the Holocaust. Jews were forced to move into ghettos where living conditions were miserable. Ghettos were often enclosed districts that isolated Jews from the non-Jewish population and from other Jewish communities. The ghettos isolating Jews were meant to be temporary. In many places, ghettoization lasted only for a few days or weeks. In others, ghettoization lasted for several years. The vast majority of ghetto inhabitants died from disease, starvation, shooting, or deportation to killing centers. Lodz was the first and last ghetto. If you visit the Lodz ghetto now, it is literally the same as what it used to look like. It looks like time has frozen, because Lodz wasn't destroyed in the war. For proportion, it's kind of like putting everyone from Dublin and County Dublin into Walkinstown, but smaller. The Jews would sit and make clothes for the Nazis. If you worked, you would get a work slip and show it to the soldiers, who would then give food. If you didn't work, you didn't get a work slip, so you couldn't show it to the Nazis, and you didn't get food, so everyone had to work. Moshe arrived with his mom and grandfather in 1939, when he was about 11 or 12. It is unclear because he lied about his age a lot. He was there until 1944, when he was sent to a concentration camp. His mom was sent to a death camp in 1941, and his grandfather a couple months later. After his grandfather got sent to a death camp, he was sent to an orphanage in the ghetto where he met his gang, basically his friend group, and they helped each other survive. The gang consisted of him, which he was referred to Mandelman by his last name, Moshe Ravovsky, Meshulman, last name unknown, and Yatrik, last name also unknown. He was actually in a list to send to a death camp, but somehow managed to escape. After that, he had to live in a basement with 7 to 8 other people for a year and a half, to hide not only from the Nazi patrollers, but also from the Jewish police in the ghetto. Some of those who he stayed with were professors, so they taught him some of the things they learned. In the mornings, he and his friends would go on a hunt for food. In 1944, Nazis started to clear people from the ghettos and send them to concentration and death camps. KL Auschwitz was the largest of the German Nazi concentration camps and extermination centers. Over 1.1 million men, women, and children lost their lives there. Generally speaking, a concentration camp is a place where people are concentrated and imprisoned without trial. Inmates are usually exploited for their labor and kept under harsh conditions, though this is not always the case. The aim of the Nazi concentration camps was to contain prisoners in one place. The administration of the camps had a distinct disregard for inmates' health and life. As a result, tens of thousands of people perished within the camps. The aim of extermination camps was to murder and annihilate all races deemed degenerate, primarily Jews but also Roma. The people who were deemed fit enough to work, mostly men who weren't too sick to work, were sent to the concentration camps, and everyone else was sent to death camps. Moshe arrived in Auschwitz in August of 1944 with his friends. They were all sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the slavery part of Auschwitz. He stayed in Auschwitz from August of 1944 to January of 1945, so half a year. From 1942, the Germans started to lose the war. At the start of 1945, the Nazis started to clear out Auschwitz. If you could still work, you would be sent to another concentration camp. Moshe was on the last train from Auschwitz and got sent to Dachau concentration camp. The Dachau concentration camp in Austria was established in March 1933. It was the first specifically concentration camp established by the Nazi government. Heinrich Himmler, as a police president of Munich, officially described the camp as the first concentration camp for political prisoners. It was located on the grounds of an abandoned munitions factory near the northeastern part of the town Dachau, about 10 miles northwest of Munich in southern Germany. Moshe was actually meant to be sent to a different concentration camp, but because of the Germans already losing, he didn't. He got there with Moshe Revovsky, whilst the other two friends had to part ways with them. He didn't spend much time in Dachau as the Americans were already on their way to free them. My dad actually met Moshe Revovsky at my grandpa's funeral, and he told him that whilst they were in Dachau, he was really, really weak, and my grandpa, he doesn't know how, but he brought him a bowl of chicken soup that ended up saving his life, as it gave him strength to then go on to the death march and survive it too. Death marches were when a large amount of prisoners had to march in the freezing cold of winter for a long distance, all day, and at night they would sleep under trees or where they could find a bit of shelter. Those who fell or lagged and walked too slowly would immediately get shot by Nazi soldiers. Bear in mind they were all extremely weak and sick. They could hear the fighting with the American troops not too far from them every day getting closer, and that gave them some hope that they would be saved. One night on the death march, the prisoners woke up and found that there wasn't any soldiers. Everyone started to leave in one direction, but Moshe in the other. This is where he met American Rangers. The American Rangers took him to a nearby hospital they took over in Austria. The hospital was actually Adolf Hitler's favorite, which the Nazis made a recovery home for their fallen soldiers. American Rangers took survivors there. He slowly started to get better, growing his hair and gaining some weight. He also befriended American troops who at the time were trying to find out who the SS were, so he helped them. Moshe and a few of his friends lived in a shared apartment that got set up for them. He even considered moving to America, but his plans got changed after some Israeli soldiers working for Britain, as Israel was still under their control, came and recruited him. He helped them organize and recruit people for an aliyah, which means an immigration of Jews to Israel. When the time finally came for him to immigrate to Israel, the ship he was on got captured, and he, as well as everyone on the ship, immediately got sent to a jail camp in Cyprus. When Israel got independence, he finally got sent to Israel and got recruited into the army. He also changed his last name to Hadromi, translating to the South in Hebrew.